Hi there. Today I'm going to be showing you the power of Python programming in revenue operations, and hopefully I'll inspire you to take this Python for RevOps crash course. Python is such a useful skill in revenue operations because automation is one of the foundational pillars of revenue operations, and Python makes automation a breeze. It makes it easy to build complex workflows that are fully customizable and that can interface with any online platform using APIs. And Python allows you to do so at a cost that is fractions of the cost of iPaaS tools like Zapier or Workato. This course aims to teach you the fundamentals of programming and get you started by running your first script, hopefully within 2 hours. Will you be a full stack engineer by the time this course is finished? No, but my goal is that you will have the foundational understanding to start writing your own scripts, and you will know where to go to enhance your knowledge, get the code you need to do a certain task, and where you can go to get help troubleshooting any issues you face. And just in case you're a bit perplexed about that word API, I have another course called Demystify the API Crash Course, which I like to say is the Cabernet Sauvignon to this course's filet mignon. So check that out if you don't know what APIs are yet, because they are a foundational part of how the modern software ecosystem communicates, and they go hand in hand with knowing Python. They really enable you to build very sophisticated automation workflows. So that's why you should be excited about this course. And hopefully by the time I've gone through the rest of this page, you'll be inspired to pre-register for the course and let me know what you'd like to see. So when I do launch the course sometime next year, I'll be able to email you when it's launched. And while I'm building the course, I'll take all this feedback into account so I know I'm building something that you guys really want to see. First, let's talk about why you should learn a programming language for RevOps. As I mentioned before, Python makes it very easy to make API requests, and API requests are how platforms in the modern software ecosystem communicate with one another. So the example I always like to use is with Zapier and the Marketo app. So sometimes Zapier doesn't offer all the functionality that an app like Marketo offers. So we have to make API requests to Marketo in order to access its full functionality. So to show you what I mean by this, when I go into the Marketo app in Zapier, Zapier only has 3 native actions for Marketo: add lead to list, create or update lead, and find lead. However, if I check out the Marketo API docs, there are hundreds of actions that we can take using the Marketo API. It's just that Zapier has only built 3 of them. So if we want to access all the functionality of Marketo programmatically or in our automation workflows, then we have to make API requests using a programming language to access the full functionality of Marketo, like I'm doing in this other's app. Here I'm using Python code to make API requests to Marketo to get or create folders, to find programs, to clone programs, and to update program tokens. So that's why it's a good idea to know a programming language, because it really unlocks the full functionality of online platforms via the API of that online platform. So that's reason number 1. The second reason is, from my experience, once workflows get very complicated in Zapier, they become hard to maintain and even hard to modify and edit because of how complex they are. And this is especially problematic when you need to branch and go down paths in Zapier. So a good example is this one here. Because paths don't rejoin and continue down the same main flow, the paths always stay diverged in Zapier. And this leads to issues where you'll just have the same duplicate actions in the diverged paths. So that means if you have to update the actions in one path, you also have to update the action in the other path, which makes maintenance more difficult. So this isn't great. Ideally, you'd want the paths to merge and then continue down the main flow so you don't need any of these duplicate actions. And that's why I really like Python, because if you do have some sort of divergence, like in this case, we have conditional logic, we'll diverge for a little bit, but once we've done the necessary diverging, we'll come back to the main script and continue on. So there is no duplicate logic like there is in these diverging Zapier branches. So that's one thing that I've noticed using Zapier, is that when you need to split down different paths, the paths never rejoin, which means you have duplicate logic, and that makes maintenance very difficult. But the other issue is just also when you have, let me show you what this one looks like. So this is also another complex looking Zap, which isn't friendly to look at. But it becomes more complex once Zaps start calling sub-Zaps, and once those sub-Zaps start calling other sub-Zaps. So for example, here we can see that this main Zap calls this sub-Zap here. It calls another sub-Zap here. It sends a webhook here. We've got another sub-Zap present here. And within Zapier, if you want to follow the flow of logic or the flow of automation, you then have to navigate outside this flow to find those other sub-Zaps, open those up, and then dive in to see what's going on in the sub-Zap to understand the full automation workflow. Personally, I prefer the view when you're using a coding environment. So I'm using a platform called Replit here. But for me, it's very nice where I can see my main function here. And then off to the side, I can see all the other functions. Functions are equivalent to sub-Zaps. They're something that can be called from the main function to execute a certain task. And once a certain task has been executed, we then get returned to the main program and the rest of the flow continues. So functions you can think of as helpers for your main automation flow. So I just like the way it's set up in a programming environment where you've got your main function, and then you can import all the custom functions that you need to build. And then if you call a custom function, let's see if I can find one, like this one here, to send a Slack message to a channel. If you call a custom function in your main script and you want to see what it's doing, it's very easy to find that custom function. You just go to the left-hand pane, and then you scroll down to the send Slack channel message function that we're using in the main script. So I personally think it's easier to navigate between main script and functions in a programming environment versus having to do all this jumping around in Zapier. So in summary, when workflows become very complex with branches and conditional logic, and when you're calling functions or sub-Zaps, I think it's much easier to build these complex workflows in a programming tool like Python, or in a programming language like Python. And then the third and final reason is the cost savings. So the way iPaaS tools make their money is that they charge based on task usage and compute, but there is a compute markup because these iPaaS tools have to pay for the engineers who built the easy-to-use automation builder. They have to pay for the marketers who brought you to their site, and they have to pay for all the support personnel who are spending time helping you with the issues you're facing. So although these iPaaS tools make it easier to automate and interface with third-party platforms, it comes at a price. So on the other hand, when you run your own Python script from your laptop, it's the computation is free. Or if you host a Python script online, you will have to pay for the compute units when the script runs on the server. But the cost of running this script on a server will be fractions of the cost compared to the equivalent task usage in an iPaaS tool. And this is especially important when you have cases like I've had in the past where I'm trying to merge 13,000 duplicates, or I'm trying to score 100,000 leads and accounts. When you're trying to do things at a large volume, this can be very costly if you're using iPaaS tools. And that's why it's much better to use a programming language in cases like this. So these are the three main reasons, based on my experience, why it's useful to learn a programming language in RevOps. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to get on board with the idea that you should learn a programming language for RevOps. But then you might be wondering, Okay, but why Python? So Python is renowned for being one of the most beginner-friendly and versatile programming languages. I've tried out a few different programming languages in my 10 plus years of programming. I've tried out C++, I've tried out C Sharp, I've tried out JavaScript, and Python is by far the easiest programming language I've used out of all of those other three languages. It makes it so easy where if you're trying to achieve something in Python, it gives you shortcuts to do that, which would take you lines of code in all of those other languages I mentioned. So it's just much easier to program, and there are a lot less lines of code needed because Python is so easy to use. And if my word isn't enough, I've got a few statistics here that show how easy Python is to use and how widespread it is in the modern day world. So as it says here, Python is clear and easy to learn, and it's prioritized for human readable code. And a survey by Coding Dojo found that 88% of respondents said it was the easiest programming language to learn. And then there are a vast number of people who are using Python. There are millions of developers online, which means if you have an issue or problem you're trying to solve, it'll be very easy for you to get help by jumping on an online forum like Stack Overflow, because there will be plenty of Python developers able to help you. Python is the third most popular language used by over 50% of respondents, and it's one of the most fastest adopted languages in the world. So it's only going to keep becoming more popular, and more people are going to use it. So there'll be more resources available for you online to expedite your learning, but also help you if you face any challenges. And then the last part of this is Python, because it's so widely used, there are a great number of libraries available where people have built code to achieve common functionality that we're typically looking for. So you can use pre-built libraries like pandas, requests, or Selenium to help you do things like data manipulation, making API requests, and doing automation. So all the libraries that exist in Python mean we can stand on the shoulders of giants and use the code that other people have written to achieve functionality that we want to do. And let's see what we're going to be covering in the course. So this is the outline I have for the moment, but as I mentioned, if you guys give me feedback in this form, I'll modify the course outline to make sure I'm meeting the goals that you people would like to get from the course. So first of all, I'm going to show you how to download and set up PyCharm. This is the coding environment that I really like to use. I'll give you a sneak peek of it here. So this is what PyCharm looks like, and I just find it's a really great way to program. It's a nice interface, and it's very easy to debug your code. You can put breakpoints in your code and pause the code at certain lines so you can see the value of variables where you pause the code, and it just makes debugging very easy. So that's why PyCharm is my environment of choice, and that's the one I plan on using for this course. So I'll show you how to get up and running with your coding environment. Then I'm going to show you how to install some libraries in PyCharm. So as I mentioned, we can stand on the shoulders of giants and use the logic and functionality that others have already coded for us. Then we're going to run our first script. I'm thinking we'll do something like import a CSV, we'll process some data, do some cool things, and then export the results back to a CSV file. And this will get you hands-on experience with Python basics like variables, loops, functions, and conditional statements. Then, I've talked about these a lot already, but I'm going to make an API request or two as well to show you how it's possible to connect with third-party platforms and use their functionality within your Python script. Then I'm going to show you how to use the debugger within PyCharm, like I just showed you here. I'll show you how to use that debugger. And I'll also show you how you can Google errors, search Stack Overflow, and use ChatGPT to help you troubleshoot your code. Then we're going to start writing our own code using ChatGPT. From my experience, ChatGPT has been phenomenal for writing code, and it gets the code right. And you can run the code right away almost 90% of the time. But just in case the code doesn't work, I'm going to show you how you can work with something like ChatGPT to iterate on your code so that it does work, and how you can iterate on your code to make changes using something like ChatGPT. And then the final part of it is I'm going to show you how you can host your code in an online platform like Replit, so the code can be triggered on demand when you send it some sort of action. So that's the outline for the course. A little bit about me. As I mentioned, I've been programming since 2013 when I took my first programming module in college in C++. Then 2 years later, I taught myself how to program in Python because I was part of a robotics team, which was using Python to build the robot we were entering in a competition. And then fast forward to 2019, that's when I took on my first role as a Marketo administrator. And I brought my skills of problem solving, analytics, and programming skills from the engineering domain to the revenue operations domain. And since then, I've used Python and APIs to automate a lot of repetitive tasks, which has saved me time in my day-to-day and meant that I could focus on more strategic projects that move the needle. And it's also saved my company a lot of money. I estimate that in 1 year alone, my knowledge of Python and APIs saved my company $21,000. $15,000 was saved by merging 13,000 duplicates in my Marketo instance, because it saved us from having to go up a database size in our Marketo contract renewal. And it also saved us from needing a $10,000 Cloudingo contract to merge this backlog of duplicates. And then I also estimate that with the 5 hours per month where you'd have to pay a marketing operations freelancer like $100 an hour, let's just take that as the average hourly salary multiplied by 12 months, I estimate that I saved roughly $6,000 a year in the automation workflows I built for my company for doing things like email sends, program cloning, and duplicate merging. And this is not to mention, or this doesn't even factor in projects like reverting field values using the bulk API with Marketo that can save a full day of repetitive clicking. So I think my background in revenue operations means that I understand the problems we face as RevOps professionals, and I know what it's like when it comes to working with the sales and marketing teams at our organizations to solve the challenges we face. So I believe I'm uniquely positioned to teach you about the power of revenue operations, to teach you about the power of Python in revenue operations, and show you how to automate your workflows so that you can spend more time on strategic projects that will move the needle. So I hope I've shown you why Python is so powerful in revenue operations, and hopefully you're inspired. You'll fill out your email address here and you'll tell me what you'd like to see in the course. And I look forward to hearing all of your feedback and I look forward to launching this course sometime in 2025. Talk to you soon.